Penn State versus Ohio State, and you brought this up earlier. In the beginning of the season was going to be a massive matchup. James Franklin's fired. Now we're here. Ohio State versus Penn State, a game that we thought would be one of those during this weekend that would be massive. Nevertheless, it is not as massive as we anticipated it to be. Nevertheless, we have to still play it. Ohio State versus Penn State, when you preview this game, how do you see it going down?
Yeah, I mean, we could just start this off by saying that I think Ohio State's going to completely smoke Penn State. And I don't think that there's a hot take involved with that. There is no there's nothing surprising to say that Ohio State is going to completely dominate this Penn State squad. Since the firing with Franklin and since their complete downturn, this team has gone from bad to worse. Gronkemeyer, who's taken over at quarterback, he had a pretty shaky game against Iowa. I'm not saying that he is a bad quarterback. I'm not saying that he can't develop into a good quarterback. He was a guy who was pretty highly recruited. He's got a lot of potential, but it's very clearly too soon for him to step into this type of a setting, having to travel on the road to face Ohio State. Blake, I think that this is just a complete overmatch. We're talking about a team that is a little bit of a dead body right now, that is just trying to stay afloat and has been trying to stop the bleeding, and they haven't been able to do so. I do not see a world where Ohio State does not cover that 20.5 point spread on FanDuel. That might be a little bit too big, but there feels like there's a pretty big disparity between the offensive potency of Ohio State and the little bit of juice that Penn State has occasionally when they're trying to move the ball on offense.
Well, the biggest weakness defensively for Penn State is the biggest weakness for Ohio State. They can't really stop the run right now. It's not really all on them. So Penn State is 90th in the country in rush yards allowed and rushing defense as a whole. They're 90th in both. They're giving up 159 yards on the ground per game. Ohio State's 71st in rushing. But here's the thing why I think that this one might be a little bit closer than that 20.5 that you say. Penn State is top 10 in the country at not allowing explosive plays. Ohio State is 115th in the country in explosive plays. Joe, their offense has been very potent. The question I have is, I don't know if this defense is as bad as people want to, Ohio State fans want to talk about Jim Knowles. I understand that. Can they limit and contain this Ohio State team enough? And can they do something that, quite honestly, they're going to have to do to stay in this one? They're going to have to force Julian Sayin into multiple turnovers. They're going to have to get off the field on third down at a massive rate, which they've not been able to do. I do think it's funny, though. Joe, think about this. I found this stat today. So they're 80th in the country on third down rate is Penn State. They're second if you take out the second half. Meaning because of they're on the field so much, because their offense is so bad, they've been getting exhausted. They've been getting absolutely run down because their offense can't sustain. But, man, I'm with you in the sense of Ohio State's just got too much right now. And I think that this team culturally is fractured for Penn State. I think that they have tried to battle. They've tried to do things. The quarterback position, the quarterback issue is clearly it has been a big issue. I just don't know how Penn State moves the football, to your point. They're 108th in the country in passing. They're 97th in the country in total offense. And really and truthfully, if they can't suffocate the time of possession and play really good defensively, they're just not going to be able to score enough. I do wonder if they can limit and just contain enough this Ohio State offense so that this offense has any chance whatsoever. I'm willing to give a quarterback after his first start a second chance because I think it's a hard position to be in. But I agree with you. I think Ohio State just has way too much defensively for them to move the ball effectively to be able to overcome in this one.
Right. I think that what you said at the start of this is the important part with Penn State. Their defense is still very talented. And as we were talking about with Elks' Super Chat, Jim Knowles, he's set up this team. They've been decent this year. They've had a couple of bad performances, but they have a lot of really good athletes out there. Zakee Wheatley, tremendous player. He's had a lot of big plays this year. Dani Dennis-Sutton, has 5.5 tackles for loss on the season. Amari Campbell, who they brought in at linebacker from North Carolina, was a guy that I liked in the preseason and who has done some great stuff for this team. He's one of their leading tacklers so far in 2025. Blake, they have one of the most physically gifted defenses in college football. They have been one of the best teams, as you talked about, at limiting explosive plays to opposing teams on the ground, through the air, both. But where I think this game gets out of hand, and I feel like it could end up being like the Washington game, where it was a little close, but we all knew it wasn't. And then Ohio State separated, and the game was pretty much over. There just wasn't enough for Washington to keep up. And if Washington's typically powerful offense couldn't keep up with Ohio State, I really don't think that this Penn State unit will be able to do so. The craziest thing when we look at this Penn State offense, Blake, is that it was really shaky with Drew Aller, and we spent all that time talking about how, man, he just looks off. The accuracy and the timing's not there. He didn't improve as a decision maker. It just doesn't look like we had hoped with the step forward that it could have taken. And especially with all of the new faces that they brought in at receiver. Now we've got a young guy who has to go up against this insanely talented Ohio State defense with all these dudes on it, with Arvell Reese and Caden Curry and Caden McDonald, just in that front seven that he is going to have to deal with. I think it does help that this Penn State offensive line has been pretty solid. They've only allowed 7 sacks so far this year. Grunkemeyer is going to get pretty, good amount of time in the pocket. But I have a very hard time believing that Penn State is going to be able to move the ball. If this game is 24-0, it wouldn't shock me. That legitimately wouldn't shock me if that's what the score was, and Ohio State covered in that regard.
Very well could. I like your analogy there in reference to the Washington game and how that one went down. I'm kind of with you there. I mean, look, I want to come in here and break this game down. I wonder. Here's what I wonder for Penn State versus Ohio State. This one, does Penn State ever just show up? Because you got a lot of really good athletes. Like, did they ever just put their foot down and say enough is enough, and we keep a game like this close? I don't know. I don't know if they do. But I see a super chat. We'll get to it in just a minute. Teams aren't playing prevent versus Ohio State, Oaks. They're not. You can say that they are, but they're not. Like, I will show you the film and break it down for you. They're not. I do wonder later on in the season, whether it be the playoff, regardless, if the explosive play rate for Ohio State being 115th comes back to bite them any. I do think that teams are limiting, what you're doing in that regard with the DBs. But here's the problem with that. You're 71st in the country in rushing. You're 71st in the country in rushing. So if teams are playing prevent, then it makes it worse for your run game. So you can't have it both ways. Oh, well, teams are taking away because they're playing prevent. Let's just say that you're right. You're not, but let's just say that you're right. Then you're not able to run the ball. At some point, this is going to fester for Ohio State. They have been elite defensively. They have shown and have continued to be elite defensively. And now you have a team, Joe, that quite honestly in Penn State couldn't bust a grape with 2 Samoan wrestlers, right? Like, if 2 Samoan wrestlers came and tried to bust a grape, they can't do it. I mean, that's how bad they've been. You know what Samoan wrestlers do?
No.
They ram into one another over and over and see who gets knocked down first.
Oh,
they couldn't bust it.
I'm unfamiliar with Samoan wrestling.
Maybe that's some Southern saying. But they can't bust a grape. They can't get push when they need to. They can't hit explosive plays when they need to. I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm really with you on this one. I don't think that they shut him out. I don't know if they shut him out. But I do think because they're unable to move the football, it's too much for this defense, and Ohio State just continues to pour it on them. Not from a point perspective, but it just becomes overwhelming for Penn State here.
And look, to Ohio State's somewhat credit, Bo Jackson has emerged recently as a really nice piece for the run game. Mm-hmm. I just would like to see a little bit more consistency, but it's to your point where, this is Elks' super chat that he, that you referenced that we're talking about. Hard to get explosive when the D plays to prevent it. The problem what you just said, like as you just mentioned, you'd be able to run the ball if that were the case.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part about this, any defense wants to limit explosive plays. And the implication is then that teams are playing Ohio State not to get blown out. I find that very hard to believe. I understand.
No, they're not. Go watch the Washington game. That's not what they ran man across the board.
I think that it's a misidentification of how teams are covering Jeremiah Smith, and they're trying to cover Carnell Tate when there's a very limited way to slow down guys that are that talented. And because they're so gifted, and you might have a really good play and you might have really solid coverage on a play, and they're still going to break through. I think it has just more to do with the fact that your playmakers are so good at overcoming good defensive schemes. I don't think it has anything to do with teams literally trying to prevent explosive plays from happening. I don't think any team really plays defense like that. Nobody is approaching it like that unless they're trying not to get blown out. That teams do that when they're like completely mailing it in and they don't want to get embarrassed. Teams do that in the second half all the time. Indiana did that last year against Ohio State because they were trying not to get blown out. Like that, those are the settings that stuff shows up in. I don't think anyone's really doing that to Ohio State at the current moment.
Well, and look, it's not that like the issues here are not like there's nothing that you can look at Ohio State defensively and say to yourself, I don't know if there's a weakness. Like, let me give you an example. Joe, there's not a statistical category that they're not top 10 in.
Yeah.
There's not one. They're first in the country in total defense. They're eighth in the country in rushing defense. They're third in the country in passing defense. They're first in the country in third down defense. They're first in the country in scoring defense. And I don't know, like, when I watch Ohio State, there's just not anything that I really see on film that anybody's been able to try to attack where they can take over. You talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we brought up Ohio State, and just to re-reference it back. They have an elite understanding of what Matt Patricia is trying to do throughout the game. Meaning, there have been multiple times Caleb Downs walks down the line and then bails right before the guy's about to clap, and then he thinks he sees something, and then it's post-snap, there's something completely else. They know what they're doing, and I don't think Penn State has a chance to score enough. They're not going to score enough. I look at this as a game for Ohio State and say, listen, can you continue to improve here? And look, we probably shouldn't be writing off Penn State the way that we are. Joe, when we do that, bad things happen. When we do that, bad things start happening. I just don't see that. Penn State's given me no hope in reference to saying that they're going to be able to overcome this one. Maybe the run game gets going. Maybe the run game gets going at an elite level, and they're able to suffocate that time of possession and get in. But I just don't know if I see that.
And to this point, Penn State does have a solid enough of a run defense that they could end up slowing down the Ohio State rushing attack. But here's just the main takeaway with all this. As you just said here, Ohio State is the most well-rounded team at the current moment. They're the only team that we could talk about here that even if their run game isn't performing that great, it's still deep. They're still deep at running back. They still have one of the best offensive lines in college football, if not the best offensive line in college football. They have so much talent in every single position group, and they are gifted in every single category. Statistically, they're incredibly dominant at everything that they do. Penn State is not going to do anything to challenge them. This is going to be one of those games where it's going to be a speed bump. I think we're going to watch this, and very quickly we're going to be turning away to watch something else. I don't even know if I'm going to put this on the main TV, if I'm being completely honest with you. This is the noon kick game, right?
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure it's the Fox noon kickoff game, which doesn't make it very... Oh, it is. It is the Fox noon kickoff game, which I'll probably be watching Vanderbilt, Texas instead, because I don't really have much faith that this game is going to be very competitive.
We shall see. I feel like every time we do this, somebody finds a way to blow it here, and we're just like, how did this even happen? I don't think that happens this week. All right, Dig Buck says, where do you think Franklin lands? We'll get to that in a minute.